I want to say that I feel very privileged to be introducing Katherine McCloskey to you today. I had the privilege of having about an hour with her last week, and I still feel inspired by the things she told me. She's a Presbyterian minister and has been ordained about 20 years, but she's speaking to us this morning as the community chaplain and executive director of ARISE, ARISE, and that stands for Advocacy and Reclaiming Individuals Involved in the Sex Trade Through Empowerment. It's a mouthful, but they really provide outreach, case management, and spiritual care to sexually exploited or trafficked women, girls, and boys. Their goal is to bring hope to each person they work with. And I'm hoping Katherine, I just asked her if she'd suggest ways in which people who want to volunteer with ARISE might be involved. So I think we're in for a treat this afternoon. And Katherine, thank you for being with us. And I'll turn things over to you.
Thank you, Mary. And thank you for unpacking that acronym. Not my skill set. Acronyms are not my skill set. I thought I would begin. It's my understanding from Mary that ARISE is brand new to all of you or most of you. So it makes sense to me to kind of begin at the beginning, the sort of how did ARISE happen and the why of ARISE, and to gently touch on where Reverend Deb Stanbury's lives and my lives paralleled or dovetailed in ways that God has used in within to create power within this ministry. The founder is the founder of this ministry is Reverend Deb Stanbury, and she had experience prior to ARISE working with Evergreen, living out west, studying out west in BC. And so under the guidance of her mentors and the women that she worked with who were also clergy, and the experience of doing street level intervention at Evergreen, downtown Toronto, and then with the church that was her congregational placement in Vancouver, British Columbia, there was this vision of setting God's table in unusual places, and that the most meaningful ministry is ministry where the church can get to the street and the street can feel welcomed in the church. So those were her premises for why ARISE and what made ARISE so very important. When Deb started ARISE, it was in Toronto, it was in 2013. I was working as the director of spiritual programs at Downtown Mission of the Presbyterian Church in Canada. So the work I was doing meant that people were coming to where I was, and then we would work together. But it would be rare that I would necessarily have the experience of being where and how the people were living. With Deb and I being in the same presbytery, we started working together, and I joined her as a volunteer. I joined her as a volunteer with her street level ministry. Deb is younger than I am. Deb is more athletic than I am. Deb is trained in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So Deb would pack these backpacks to a level that was comfortable to her. So imagine a very, very full backpack filled with water bottles, resources, something that we call pretty bags. Pretty bags are small bags that are filled with things that are going to make the street safer, more comfortable, and perhaps offer dignity to the women as they're working. So the bags they're about this big, and they have hand lotion, they have lip balm, they have tools of the trade, condoms, things that go with that, hair clips, tissue, things for feminine care that said to our ladies that they matter to us, that we want them to feel safe, and we want there to be a certain amount of dignity in their evening. Each one of these has a package of gum in it, and that package of gum holds my business card or a Rise related business card so that the ladies can reach out to us during the week. And then as we get into the language of goal-based work, that card is a second, third contact source for the ladies. What was powerful, because I was essentially trying to keep up with Deb at the pace that she could walk, her level of engagement, and also the contagiousness of her vision. So we would walk. We did not drive. We would walk. We would start at River Street and Shooter, so Regent Park. And we would walk towards Yonge, and we would walk up Yonge, and we would come across streets like Carlton or Gerrard, Dundas. And we would go to where the ladies were working. We would pay special attention to Homewood because that's the trans ladies and they're particularly vulnerable. And we would walk with these backpacks. What I became well known for was the speed and willingness with which I would share water, because water was the heaviest part of the weight. And I will give you water if it's hot out, if it's freezing out. I will give you water. And because it's heavy and it's harder to carry, but at the same token, it's also very helpful. We carry, when we have them, we carry small gift cards. A $5, well now a $10 gift card for A&W, McDonald's, Tim Hortons. Allows legitimate shelter for our ladies if they need it. It allows more food than we have in our backpacks if there's sugar issues. So all of this is describing going to where people are, setting God's table in a way that says we care and you matter. We begin with dignity. We begin with immediate needs. Part of my background, and I thought I would sort of unpack this. I did live in Vancouver for 7 beautiful years of my life. I did have a church ministry in rural Alberta. And part of that gave me an opportunity to be in Saskatchewan where something called Returning to Spirit was being offered, which I attended because having worked in psychiatric social work before I returned to school to study divinity meant that I have a heart and I have an ear for the street. So what Returning to Spirit is, for those of you who have not heard of it, it is an opportunity, a program, a chance to seminar together that was inspired by Sister Anne, who's from British Columbia, and her hope and prayer was to bring the church and Indigenous people together in the same place where conversation could happen and bread could be broken together. And when I'm talking about is probably 15 years ago. So the healing and reconciliation that the United Church, the Presbyterian Church, the human beings have been working on was only just beginning. The mantra that Sister Anne had, being a nun or a sister working on a First Nation in northern BC, pushing against the hurt caused and acknowledging the hurt caused by the residential school system, was to make the impossible possible. Working with the Rise can feel like that, although we come from a place of absolutely believing in a future worth having that we invite our ladies into. I bring that to you because I thought, being from BC, I thought because my dad had done ministry with Indigenous people, I thought that I could sort of just step into that. Until it happened at Returning to Spirit, there was an Indigenous man and an Inish man who told me later that when we first gathered, there was an Indigenous group of people, there were clergy people. When we first gathered as a whole, he had looked at me from across the room and said, "This woman is too white and too churchy for him to ever want to speak a word to me." Now, by the time we had done our clergy seminars and the Indigenous seminars that happened and the group as a whole seminars that happened through that time together, he and I actually developed a mutual fondness and friendship and respect for each other. But it's humbly and important for me to remember that sometimes I appear too white and too churchy to be someone that can just walk into somebody else's reality or life. There was another woman that I spoke with who basically asked me, what right did I have to apologize or offer any type of awareness or insight into what her experience with residential schools may have been? And at that point, I was able to, and she was right, she was very angry at me to even dare to say to her that I wanted to speak into her situation from a place of hurt for what had happened to her. And at that point, I had an opportunity to speak about my Métis stepson, about his partner, about my Métis grandchildren. And so as she looked at those pictures, there was a message of understanding. Then again, reminded me of how much I still need to learn, because it's not enough to have family members in my bloodline that have survived. I need to be mindful of my own non-Indigenous background so that I can, so that when I'm meeting with our ladies, I'm coming from a place of that's humble enough to not sort of just charge into the space that is their world. I've had conversations with people who will actually come up to me and say things like, and I refer to this as one of the lies that we tell ourselves about what human trafficking looks like in Canada, most specifically Toronto. And that is, well, it's just that immigration problem. Or if we didn't let so many people in, or I guess what's happening in the Ukraine is making it worse. And it's at that point that I have an immediate opportunity to say, and you saw that on the slide that I shared with you, really how compelling the statistics are. So 95% of victims of human trafficking in Canada are women and girls. And 72% of those women and girls, those mothers and daughters, those stolen sisters, are under the age of 25. 90% of these women and girls are born in Canada, with Indigenous women being the least protected of all of the women in Canada from being trafficked. So our first mothers, our first sisters, our first daughters, those who are from First Nations are the most vulnerable to being human trafficked in Canada. And that I say because it's important for us to remember from a posture of accountability and a posture of compassion. And then in that, I think there's an obligation to educate ourselves as much as possible about on the information that we already know about what is our Canadian history. During COVID, we fell away from being able to do the street level outreach that we're so well known for. So we put our backpacks down. We had to put our pretty bags aside for a little while. And we shifted, we pivoted, we moved into electronic outreach. So that means that we can, from our computers, using something called Scarlet Hope or Freedom Signal, send an electronic message to phone numbers that are attached to escort or other human trafficking ads, sex trafficking ads. So we work from a script and we send a message and we wait. And in that message, we're saying, happy Monday, happy Sunday, happy Thursday, whatever night it is. My name is Katherine, and I work with an agency in Toronto, and we provide outreach to women in the life. And we start so thin. Our message is very thin. It's very light, because I don't know if I'm messaging with a trafficker. I don't know if I'm messaging with someone who's monitoring that phone line. I don't know if I'm messaging with a survivor. So we have a set script, and we proceed sort of with a gentle caution because if we're sharing too much too soon and it is a trafficker, we are making vulnerable the very people that we wish we could help. Because we know that traffickers will react to these messages, and we know that harm can happen. With those messages, we're able to set dates and times when we might be able to meet with someone in person. We might be able to have a safe address, and then we can send gift cards when we have gift cards that attend to food insecurity, maybe expand an individual's budget for the month, and meet some tangible needs where we're able to do that. And it's often from doing that more conversation happens, or a meet and greet happens, or we can invite the individual to be present at one of our outreach coffees or a lunch church, or for a one-on-one meeting. That's what the electronic outreach looks like, and that's really quite powerful for us. And I have a vision in my mind that if I can because I can choose how I identify the geography that I'm reaching into using postal codes, a vision that I have is to be using postal codes that are nearby Indigenous missions all over Canada. At the moment, I'm thinking Presbyterian missions, but I would be open to using a postal code that is in proximity to missions that reach out to Indigenous people, not necessarily only for Presbyterian. And the point being that we have the experience, and we have the programming, and we have the capacity to reach out and begin relationship. But ultimately, the goal has to be walking alongside more closely, more in a tighter physical proximity. So that's something that is inspired by the fact that when we've done our standard outreach, because of how these ads work, we have found ourselves working with people in Texas. We have found ourselves reaching out to partners in Georgia or New York, or wherever it is that the individual may be at the point that they are receiving and responding to our message. So since we know that we can be a conduit for something like that, my vision and the challenge I kind of put out there is, how do we do that more immediately and more intentionally? On a street level, I'm going to take a little snippet from a sermon that I wrote last spring, because I think it gives a good description of what street outreach can look like and what it feels like, perhaps more importantly. So I'm actually reading for a minute, which will help you because my speech will slow down. So just to kind of outline that, since April of 2023, Arise has returned to driving the streets that I'm hoping to be able to walk more than I drive. The date of April 2023 is significant because I was not willing to start in-person outreach until I was absolutely sure that I could be consistent in being there every single Thursday. So until I knew that I had a team that allowed Arise to be present consistently, I wouldn't restart it. We have that now, and so we're doing that. In terms of what happens, having returned to this walking the streets, we mostly drive. When we see a lady that we recognize, or a lady that I'm pretty sure is working, either by where she is, how she's dressed, the way that she's watching the cars, a sense that I have, we'll stop, we'll park, we'll gather our resources, and then we'll offer from those resources. And it can be a very immediate need, wanting extra chocolate, recognizing the pretty bag and being thankful for that, wanting to have water. When we have food cards, hand warmers, toe warmers, scarves, hats, anything that allows us to have some conversation and a moment of connection. What started when we first started back, the first thing that struck me is there had been a 3-year gap from when I had last done this and when I had restarted I saw familiar faces right away. So for me in that moment, it was what kind of screamed out at me was the persistence with which the pain of being exploited can take hold in someone's life, and that act of being objectified, such that I was seeing and I see people that I first saw in 2013. When I drive, I look for those faces. I want to see those faces, but I don't want to see those faces because the hope is that people are able to find their way out of, off of, away from the street. In the extreme cold of winter, there's the discomfort of knowing that there's a warm car waiting, knowing that in extreme weather, we might only be reaching out from very close to our car, and then being mindful of the have and the have not, and the depth of the struggle that happens right there. And it's never enough. It is never enough to just do street level outreach. It's not enough to show up once a week and say, I care about you, here's another pretty bag. It's not enough. So we also have outreach coffees and Lund church meals. And the reason that this phrase Lund church, capital L-U-N, capital C church, is a word that Deb created, because when we have that meal, the bread is homemade, the soup is homemade, the baking is either generously donated by actually a restaurant that endorses, supports us, or it's also homemade sometimes by the ladies. And what's visioned there is a true homecoming. So being invited home to a meal, being welcomed at a table that you know has been set for you, and then also taking, when I make the bread, I make the loaf that we share from, and then I make a small loaf that I use for communion. And we talk about that agape love. We talk about the love that we have for each other. And we talk about the love that's found in the bread, the breaking of the bread, the sharing of the life. And we also drink from a drink that has been somewhere from the vine. So it could be a blended drink. It could just be grape juice. But it's bringing us to God's table and then claiming it as God's table in a way that frames how Arise began and continues to be. We are unashamedly faith-based, and there's a funny story about that I'll tell you kind of in a second. And then in the outreach coffee, that happened because I'm the minister at Beaches Presbyterian Church. And when I first started there, I was doing an outreach coffee anyway for marginalized people that I had worked with at the downtown mission where I am. What's come from that is we have a steady group of people who come the second Wednesday of every month. Some are female, some are male. All have been marginalized on some level. All know what it is to feel forgotten or left behind. And each one of them brings something to make that table better, more full, more dynamic. And it's absolutely a sharing of need and fondness to each other in a way that is God-centered, love-centered, agape-centered, and really very powerful. And I'm excited that Mary has offered to come on the 14th, which is Ash Wednesday and Valentine's Day, to start speaking about art therapy. All of our people are interested in that. We did something recently using a projector, so it looked like there were a lot of stars on the ceiling. We were trying to create just considering what is epiphany, and then we offered star words. So the star words were words that people could take and sort of walk with that word through the next month or so, through the year. We had one lady who came in. I've known her for probably since 2009. And she got the word sensible. And what was wonderfully ironic is when she arrived, she looked at the food we had, which was mostly baking and sweets. And she sort of put her hands on her hips and said, "Is this it? Are we just having junk food? Will there be any healthy food today?" And then I had to reassure her that Joanne, who was bringing the healthy food, would arrive shortly. She got the word sensible and then was asking, what is that word? And why would I get the word sensible? And what does it mean? And then we were able to remind her that her common sense and sensible thinking allows us to set our table in a good way. The not apologizing about our faith works for us and can work against us. So we're going down Homewood a couple of weeks ago, and there was a lady that we saw. Some of the ladies know us. There was another lady I recognized, but obviously didn't remember well enough. And as we were reaching out to her, she asked if we had condoms. She asked if we had certain resources. So we said yes, and we felt pretty good. She wants something that we're sharing. And we stood a little straighter, and it was going well. And then she said quite loudly, "Are you atheists?" And we couldn't say that we were that. So we said, "No, actually, we are faith-based." And she said, "Are you Christian?" And I said, "Presbyterian," which in a way I hoped was a vague enough term that maybe she would still take our resources. And then she spent the next 8 or 10 minutes, really, I would say, venting pain that she has from church engagements that haven't worked well for her. So we left realizing we couldn't share any of our resources with her. We couldn't be any different than we were. And to be mindful of the different places that people might be coming from.
I think we lost your volume.
Sorry. Having said that, we continued to drive that night, and there were ladies that were receptive to us, but we just had to honor that. We have to honor when people are saying to us very loudly, "No, thank you." That's a slightly higher track. The lower track is shooter. And at that point, the ladies are not dressed in a fancy way. There's nothing fancy about what they're doing. They're walking back and forth, watching cars. They're in the lowest levels of what this industry is. And we know because so that would be the survivor arm of the business, or survivor sex. And they're working to try and get some money to eat, maybe be able to afford a night shelter away from some of the places where they may have been, which can be quite frightening. Maybe just trying to survive. And I go out there, we begin with prayer, and I go out there honestly because when we're on Shooter Street, over and over and over again, we find ourselves wondering if the darkness might win. But for the fact that we're there. And that's the scarf or the hat, the warmers, the things that I've talked about. And the promises that the conversations we begin are intended to be continued. And we'll say things like, "Here's my card, call the summer day or night. I will remember you. I do remember you. I will be coming back." Paired with that is the drug crisis, which is very, very real. And the hill to wellness around that is very steep and very long. One of the things I'm very grateful for, what I think is extremely positive about Arise, is our peer support workers, our peer support staff. I think this is in the library because I gave 2 books to Bloor Street United. So I believe you already have the book that I'm holding in the library. It's called The Darkness and the Light, and it was written by Angel Power, who is a survivor of having been trafficked. The first person to exploit her, the person who introduced her to being trafficked, was a friend of her father. Angel was raised by her mom, but as she became a teenager, she wanted to know more about her father. She wanted to know her father. So she she reached out to him and she tried to begin a relationship with him. And in doing that, that's when she was first betrayed and trafficked. This book that I held up, From the Darkness to the Light, is a book of her poetry, which is quite powerful and marks certain moments in her life. There's another book that I've shown to Mary, which is called Hush No More. And this book was created by another mission in Northern Ontario, whose mantra it is to say, let's talk about this. Let's stop being super quiet about it. Let's create atmospheres, settings where talking can happen. Let's do that in the best way that we can. These words belong to Angel. Human trafficking before it had a name. Before the term human trafficking existed, we still did. It was always there. There wasn't the knowledge, awareness, and statistics. It was right there, but time and time again, they just missed it. Some of us tried to tell them, but they dismissed it. And how could we accurately describe it when there was no definition? How could we begin to heal in this hopeless situation? Before they had a label to call it what it was, we were labeled troublemakers and crazy because we resisted. And so we learned to be submissive. That is how we were conditioned. Even if we tried to speak out, no one would listen. And this poem is quite long, and it's Angel describing how her mom jumped in, tried to defend, fought on her behalf. It talked about her own determined efforts to speak and be heard. On our YouTube channel, there's videos of Angel. You're not going to see Angel's face because she still does not feel safe in being seen. Her trafficker or people who can harm her are alive. So Angel will public speak. Angel will come to where you are. Angel will share her story. Online, unless you're part of Angel's inner circle, you're not going to see her incredibly beautiful face. So this is the first book that Angel wrote, and Arise received funding to help with the publication of this book. She's written a second book, which I also believe is in your library, and that is From Caterpillar to Butterfly. And that is a biography told by Angel of her journey into and away from human trafficking. So the movement from victim to survivor, and who she now is an incredibly powerful public speaker. You can find these books on Amazon. I can tell you that the back of the second book, From Caterpillar to Butterfly, has an introduction to the book on it. That was written. Angel's mother, Eileen, was then diagnosed with cancer. Angel paused writing because of the urgent need to care for her mom. As Eileen's health stabilized, Angel went back to writing, and the book was published in Angel's lifetime. And Angel will tell you that back page that was written by her mom was always going to be the back page. When you see the video that we're going to show in just a couple of minutes, you're going to hear Angel speak, and you're going to see Angel. Her face is obscured, and you'll notice that she's in a car. Angel's determination to walk with Arise, to tell her story, to go where people are from a place of profound knowledge of the pain, the history. Angel is in fact Indigenous, of what human trafficking looks like in Canada, and most especially Toronto. Angel's sitting in a car participating in our video last year because she is in a parking lot of the hospital where her mom was dying. I can't think of a stronger testimony for why Arise matters, or at least the work that Arise does matters absolutely, whether it's being done by Arise or other people that are partners in this type of ministry. When Deb began, it was literally just Deb and volunteers walking with her at night. And she turned that into a program that included self-defense when we're able to offer free self-defense, Lund Church, support with gift carding, support around housing, partnering with places like Yonge Street Mission, Evergreen, Salvation Army, just partners in this work, joining people as advocates when they're in the courts, walking with people during very painful life changes, like with Angel and her mom, walking with women there in their addiction and their sobriety. We've shadowed and walked with one young woman who had a brand new baby, and Children's Aid an opinion about whether or not she could parent that baby, and walking with her and guiding her through the courts, and not being able to make a difference with this young woman and that baby, but being able to tell you right now that this many years later, she is happily parenting two other children that she had a couple of years later. So it's a ministry of active waiting. It's a ministry of seed planting. It's a ministry of being present. It's a ministry where we covet prayers, we covet volunteerism, we covet being present with us, and we covet whatever financial support might be offered. I'm not sure, if I've spoken in a straight enough line or described what arises as fully as I could, but I can tell you that with the drug crises, with the benefit of peer support, with being able to bring our life experience and offer them as a pathway out of someone else's darkness, we can be hopefully relentless. We continue to be persistent. We're in the schools when we can be with something called One Child, where we're presenting to middle school and high school classes about what child trafficking looks like. Toronto is the hub for that in Canada. They're invited to push against that in ways that One Child offers, where there is a therapeutic voice, because things will be triggered. And just as a final thing to say before we move into the video, these are Angel's words, and she wrote these words, they're in her book of poetry, to herself at a time when she felt most alone. And this is an image that I have when I'm out there in the middle of the night. These are Angel's words, written to Angel and written to anyone who is exploited. You are alive, you are capable and strong. You wish for peace and happiness. For this we all long. You are a human, you are a woman, you are an individual, you are perfectly broken and forever whole. The video that I hope I'm going to be able to show through screen sharing, we created with Tamara Cherry, who used to work the police beat for CTV News. It was created with Tamara using trauma-informed approach. She met with the ladies, she pre-interviewed them, she made a plan to videotape an interview. There's also the voice of the police officer who was the superintendent in York Region at the time of the video and is now the chief of police in London, Ontario. So we do partner with police, we partner with first responders, and I hope that in watching this video, this gives you a true idea and a very human face to the women that we reach out to and walk with. We do. We have two. We have funding right now for the two peer support workers that we have, and funding to hire a third. They are paid. They have a monthly amount, so I think we can afford $300 a month And what that does is acknowledge their relationships with other survivors. So Angel can be a go-between with our ladies who live in the Elm Street building, which is a YWCA. There's YWCA in the building, and then there's something for addictions. Jane Tweed. So she's a go-between. She's got an online group called where the ladies can come together regularly. Angel does this huge Christmas outreach that we're part of, and she goes into the encampments where neighborhood group also is. So she's a voice on the phone, she's an email, she's an in-person. Angel's also part of new moon and full moon and healing ceremonies or talking circles where she might be fire keeping remotely, can invite our ladies into it, and also with the agencies. Judy Sakanay is the lady who leads those. So a lot of it, because this is the world we're in right now, is virtual. But more importantly, our peer support workers can get a little closer, can visit with more familiarity, and then can process things that I can't process because I don't have lived experience. Very recently, Angel went to BC to be with her brother, and one of our Arise clients, or one of our Arise women, actually traveled to where Angel lives to pet sit. So there's a back and forth. The other one, she has worked as a case manager. She's now a peer support worker. She public speaks. She does one-on-one phone and Zoom conversations. She may be able to see people in person. And it's just a way, it's really a part of it is acknowledging the power of lived experience to make a difference in other people's lives. And the importance for someone like me not to go in and pretend like I understand things that I cannot possibly begin to understand. Peer support work is very, I think it's crucial. We would partner as appropriate. We're seeing older than necessarily the Covenant House age at the moment, but it can be helpful for family members too of our survivors. Young Street Mission is more of a catch-all for us because there isn't the age ceiling. We have a client who wasn't in Toronto. We were offering her support while she was living in this province, but not in Toronto. She came back to Toronto. We then had her pair up with a staff from Young Street Mission, and that has led to further programming, return to work, and housing. And that's exactly what it would look like if we had someone whose age matched with Covenant House. The same sort of things would happen. Arise is not a partner to the Furniture Bank, as an example, because they reduced how many partners they wanted to have. Covenant House could be a partner for that. Young Street Mission is a partner for that. So that kind of back and forth is really useful to us and to them. Our flyers are everywhere we can get them. We can get them placed. Evergreen has our literature because Evergreen Cross is just above. I think it's slightly above the Covenant House. The Covenant House age group, and Evergreen also can work with young people that have families. We work with everybody. The people that we're likely to encounter on the street are most likely to be actively trafficked by a third party because that's how it simply is. As recently as this month, I was working with a woman who reached out to us because she had booked a hotel room somewhere in Ontario. She arrived there at night. She had some customers. By noon the next day, she was told she had to leave. The hotel refused to refund her for the second pre-booked night. She went to a second hotel that was, you know how hotels cluster? You can go, she wasn't in St. Jacobs, but if you were in St. Jacobs, there's a cluster of hotels by the market. So that kind of proximity. She got to the second hotel. She was not allowed to be in the second hotel. She had a pre-booked room, ended up in a third hotel, frightened to invite any customers in, not sure about what had happened to her, and with 2 hotel room costs on her credit card through Expedia with a denial of refund. The woman I'm speaking about is a sex worker. She's not being trafficked by somebody else. These clients come to her through her own list of customers. And what we did with her is we paired her immediately with a lawyer that has said that we can sometimes work with her, and I connected her with an OPP in the area where I know she is. So we absolutely do not discriminate, and we respond to requests as they're made of us. And I threw that story out to you because that is something we haven't seen before. And Canada is the Nordic method. So in everything that I just said, that woman was not breaking the law. It's perfectly legal for her to
The
do
Nordic
that.
method you're referring to is saying the crime is buying sex, not selling it, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So yes, we work with people. We work with individuals. And we also are starting to have male clients. So we have a client who's an international student. We have a client in California, and his girlfriend are engaged in movies, and she's very involved with OnlyFans. They happen to be Canadian, but they're being exploited in California. It would seem almost ridiculous to put a wall up. Doesn't make sense. Yes, and we have one lady, a number of years ago, we'd see her on Homewood, and she was doing the work on Homewood too, because it's to gather money to have the surgeries that affirm her. And she would talk about how when she was on Homewood, she was often treated with more respect than in her day job as a barrister. And that was so hard to hear. So people in ordinary life where this lady's working take license in how they treat her. And there was something that felt safer or more accepting or more whatever when she was with other ladies and with us and working at night. And what you're saying is exactly true. We've worked with Maggie's, but Maggie's is more of a parallel to us. So Maggie's is a good resource for us. Deb and I years ago have done training there. So we're parallels. But we may refer people, or Maggie's is more direct sex work as opposed to ladies being trafficked. But it's parallel, and we have things in common. And we're part of the Toronto Coalition Against Human Trafficking Network as well. So there's some good partnering in there. And one of the things we explore is, where's the correlation or where's the connecting between labor trafficking and then the trafficking that we specifically look at. It's mandatory that we work in partnership with as many agencies as we can. It's the only way to make a difference street level.
Thank you, Catherine. This has been very, very helpful. I think we've all got lots to think about and to talk about.
Thank you, Mary. And thank you,
Very-
everyone, for
Very important ministry.
Thank you. And thank you for giving Arise your time today.